Welcome everybody to our 200th Capstone Defense. It's amazing that we're at this milestone. My name is Dr. Alex Sevigny, APR. I'm chairing this defense, and very excited to have Nicolle Wahl be our 200th defendee. She's going to present on her research on women in leadership roles in Canadian public relations and communications management. You've almost come a long way, baby. The way what we'll follow is the usual protocol. So you'll have 25 minutes to present. If you go a little bit over, don't worry. We're not counting seconds and minutes, so don't feel too much stress. After that, we'll go through a question period where we'll go in order. So your supervisor, Colleen Killingsworth, will go first. After that, your second reader, Terry Flynn. Actually, I should use titles. Professor Colleen Killingsworth and Dr. Terry Flynn will go next. Myself as chair can ask a question if I wish. Then we'll go through a second round. And if the audience wants to ask a question, we'll give them that opportunity if time is favorable, if we have enough time. After that, we'll put everybody except for the Defense Evaluation Committee in a room. We'll confer a little briefly about how the defense went, and we'll come back with a verdict. So there you have it. It's 7:03, so that gives you until, let's say 7:04, so that gives you until 7:29 to present. The floor is yours, Nicolle.
Or if you are in Eastern time, which Nicolle and I are, that you have 10:03, 10:04. There you go. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Dr. Sevigny, esteemed committee members, fellow students, alumni, and guests. I'm delighted to be here today to defend my capstone paper, Women in Leadership Roles in Canadian Public Relations and Communications Management. So first, an overview of how I will be presenting today. I'll begin with an introduction, walk through my literature review, and outline my research problems and questions. I'll explain my methodology, elaborate on my results, and provide a discussion of my findings. Finally, I'll provide my conclusion and discuss the limitations of this research before sharing some acknowledgements and welcoming your questions. And with that, I'm excited to begin. First, some background. The strategic importance, perceived value, and complexity of public relations and communications management continues to grow within organizations. Yet, although women now comprise the majority of professionals working in PR, the industry has been nicknamed a pink-collar ghetto or velvet ghetto, meaning that as a result of so many women entering the field, the status and ultimately the pay grade of the industry has dropped. However, as much as women must meet and raise the professional bar in public relations, systemic barriers continue to unfairly target women. Despite more than 50 years of female professionals in the PR landscape, they are still excluded from the loci of power, receive less compensation, and often face outright discrimination due to gender. While certain industries are more likely to encourage female advancement and pay equity, the persistence of this issue in other sectors is not only a human rights obstacle, but a failure to acknowledge the competitive advantage of diversity and representation at executive levels and on boards. In a 2018 McKinsey and Company report, researchers found that organizations that embrace gender diversity at the executive level were 21% more likely to experience above average profitability and had a 27% higher likelihood of outperforming their peers on long-term value creation. In this instance, the goals of finance and feminism align. Like most industries, public relations began as a male-dominated bastion. Between 1940 and 1952, the Public Relations Society of America admitted 733 active members, yet less than 30 of them were women. Don LaBelle, an influential member of CPRS over many decades, described a highly gendered industry in the 1960s. It was an old boys club, only men and managers, most of whom had started their careers in media. The 1970s marked a period of rapid growth in the number of women in the PR industry. In the US, the percentage of women in the field grew from 25% to 50% between 1970 and 1982. Given the pervasive attitudes about which types of work were appropriate for women, public relations was considered an acceptable space. Beginning in the 1980s, nascent research on women in the public relations industry was launched with 2 landmark studies by large professional societies. The International Association of Business Communicators Velvet Ghetto Study, followed closely by the Public Relations Society of America Glass Ceiling Report. These laid the foundations for future examinations on this topic. But while women were hired into the field, they had no real opportunities for power or advancement to the C-suite. More recent data suggests that women hold between 70 and 75% of all public relations roles. Despite this, women remain largely excluded from positions of power, holding fewer than 30% of senior level leadership positions. The Planck Center study noted here found that persistent inequities have the potential for worrying long-term impacts on the PR sector. In essence, the glass ceiling remains. The factors behind this ongoing disparity are numerous and varied. In comparable leadership roles, women's behavior and performance is judged less favorably, as they are measured against societal expectations for women to be warm and kind. Previous research has shown that women who adopt traditionally masculine qualities in their leadership styles are at risk of being labeled with terms like dragon lady or battle axe. Women must walk a tightrope of gender identity. A broadly identified theme in the gendered view is the gendered view of leadership styles, that while men are viewed as assertive or decisive, a woman demonstrating the same approach is more likely to be seen as confrontational or emotional. Not only are women penalized for their leadership style, but gender can influence income. Women in the communications industries earn less, are more likely to dominate junior and middle manager positions, and describe work cultures that prevent women from being promoted over men. Yet women who attain executive positions are still more likely to receive less compensation than their male counterparts. While decades have passed, these findings continue to mirror the conclusions of the 1995 U.S. Federal Glass Ceiling Report. And the financial scale of these barriers is significant. While a 1998 article in PR Reporter noted that female PR professionals in Canada and the US made 78 cents for every $1 made by men, more than a decade later, women still earned only 87 cents compared to men. Over the course of a woman's 40-year career, this salary discrepancy could surpass more than $332,000 in US dollars, although one study estimated that the impact could be as high as $1 million. In a study of Canadian PR professionals, Thurlow et al. Provides some of the most recent data on salary inequities due to gender. The average salary for women in PR in Canada was $95,600, while the average male salary was $127,500. Surveys of women in public relations have repeatedly cited pressures due to work-life imbalance, such as inconsistent policies around flexible work hours, working from home, or pressure to be available outside of work hours. With women more likely to bear unequal shares of family caregiving responsibilities, something which the COVID pandemic escalated, factors like childcare, homeschooling, and elder care fall disproportionately on their shoulders. At the same time, other research cites factors such as lack of mentorship or role models. Consistently, mentorship has emerged as a critical accelerant for female leaders across all stages of their careers. In an environment where external factors often restrict female career advancement, some high-performing women internalize insecurity and self-doubt to such an extent that it can limit their own progress. They have an internal sense that, despite having earned outstanding academic, professional, and other forms of career recognition, they are unintelligent, have fooled others, have achieved success through luck or error, and are not worthy of their actual success. Feenstra et al. Argue that they are, rather than viewing the syndrome as a dysfunction that develops out of the affected individual, research and society should explore the external forces that shape this distorted view of success, with the aim of reducing the severity and the prevalence of imposter syndrome. This study also aims to identify ways to tackle these challenges and level the playing field. Going back as far as the Velvet Ghetto study, researchers have stressed the need for salary transparency, improved mentorship programs, and increased educational opportunities. Incorporating gender education and feminist studies into public relations training could lay the groundwork for a new generation of professionals who prioritize equity and actively fight gender stereotypes. Further, researchers have suggested that current public relations education may contribute to gendered notions of leadership, possibly by emphasizing the contributions of male industry professionals or failing to acknowledge inequities. Existing research suggests that not only does the industry need more women at executive levels, but needs to adjust mindsets and cultural norms. Choi and Han found that balancing the gender ratio at the executive level was critical to changing women's perceptions that they have lower status or skills than men. Yet the job of overturning these challenges is not only that of the women in the field. It is essential that scholars, professional associations, and other colleagues in the industry are advocating for equity. Without fully understanding PR's gendered nature, we cannot create a better future. As one top female communications executive put it, the goal is not just to put more women in executive positions, but to make sure that our profession doesn't limp into the brilliantly diverse marketplace of the future. While research captures the existing disparity in the US, the UK, and other nations, little data exists on the current state of women in public relations leadership in Canada. This study addressed this gap by gathering data on women in public relations, communications management leadership positions. Further, it focused on how and to what extent various factors are influencing the ability of Canadian women to advance to executive leadership roles. The factors examined include work-life balance, lack of female mentorship, bias towards male leaders, and in particular, the issue of imposter syndrome. Based on these findings, this study offers recommendations for measures to improve gender parity and leadership opportunities for Canadian women in PR. The research problem was explored through these 4 questions. How and to what extent are women represented in leadership positions in public relations, communications management in Canada? What barriers exist for women attempting to obtain leadership roles? How and to what extent does imposter syndrome or lack of confidence prevent women from attaining leadership positions? And what measures should be implemented at various levels to reach true gender parity in leadership? In order to conduct this study, the researcher used methodological triangulation, incorporating an extensive literature review, in-depth interviews with 10 women leaders in Canadian PR, and a comprehensive anonymized online survey of female Canadian public relations professionals. In order to protect each participant from harm, they provided informed consent, and their anonymity and confidentiality was maintained. The survey was active for 2 weeks, during which time it collected 259 partial responses and 159 complete responses that passed the screening questions. Along with consent, screening involved self-declaration that the participant worked in Canada and identified as female. All 159 eligible responses were included in the results. Data collected from 10 in-depth interviews were considered eligible and included. All interview participants work in Canada for Canadian-based or multinational corporations in a range of industries: education, healthcare, automotive, finance, policing, transportation, government, and energy. On average, the interview participants had spent 20.4 years working in public relations and communications management, divided into the ranges, and the overall group were divided into the ranges of 0 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, 11 to 15 years, 16 to 20 years, 20 to 21 to 25 years, and 25 or more years. Respondents reported that the executive level public relations role in the organization was held by a woman. 223 responded affirmatively, while 31 responded negatively, and 5 respondents did not answer. Building on the previous question, 129 women reported that the executive PR or CM position in their organization had previously been held by a woman, while the remaining responses were 15 negative, 12 don't know, and 3 no answers. Women also represented a vast majority of senior but not executive level positions in their organizations. The interview participants in the finance sector noted that their head of comms was male. The interview participant in the automotive sector, who works at an organization that had existed for more than 7 decades, is the first female vice president of any kind, not just communications. Women encounter many barriers, notably in terms of compensation. Pay inequity remains a key challenge for women in PR, even as they advance into more senior positions. In the light blue slice shown here, women report having experienced pay inequity due to gender. However, privacy around salaries makes this difficult to assess. Overall, a higher number of women reported either no or that they didn't know. In the in-depth interviews, several women based in Ontario mentioned the provincial government's Sunshine List, an annual publication of public sector salaries over $100,000 as a helpful way to determine if male counterparts are making more money in similar roles. Again, confidentiality around salary makes it difficult for women to assess. While 83 respondents didn't know, 1 preferred not to answer, and 14 did not answer. The remaining participants described the following breakdown. 6 reported earning 1 to 5% less, 10 reported earning 6 to 10% less, and 19 reported earning 11 to 15% less, 18 reported earning 16 to 20% less, and 8 women reported earning more than 20% less. When captured, however, the numbers are shocking, as seen here. However, most women reported that they didn't raise the issue with their employer, mostly due to a fear of career reprisal. I was afraid of being cut out altogether, wrote one woman, while another disclosed that she had been demoted previously for bringing up gender-based inequity. I didn't want to rock the boat, wrote one. Others described being ignored, laughed at, or receiving promises to address the inequity that were never kept. And I'll share a quote here from one of the survey respondents that illustrates that experience. For many of the respondents, leaving their organization was the only option. The compounding effect of taking maternity leave was raised by several women in the study. According to one survey respondent, compensation progression was halted for members of my team due to maternity leaves. Women missed out on annual pay increases. Another woman spoke from personal experience. I took 2 maternity leaves, she said, and lost out on upward movement, pay raises, and job opportunities. And another interview participant in the automotive industry identified microaggressive comments about her family obligations, and she began withholding information about her personal life while at work. Responses were mixed regarding knowledge of institutional policies designed to prevent gender-based pay inequity. While 48 participants said they were aware of such policies, 53 responded negatively and 52 said they didn't know. And again, when asked if those policies were effective, results were also mixed. A clear pattern emerged from survey responses about the factors that advance their career progression. In particular, education and informal mentorship stood out as the most helpful factors to the participants, followed by formal mentorship, female role models, and flexibility and work-life balance. Unfortunately, many participants had stories to share about the factors that stood in the way of their progression. In both the survey and in the in-depth interviews, respondents shared experiences of subtle and outright discrimination, work-life balance, and challenges of internal confidence. As shown in this chart, factors inhibiting career progression included covert discrimination, maternity leave or childcare demands, a boys' club, and queen bee syndrome, which is a derogatory term applied to women that achieve success in traditionally male-dominated fields. These women often take on masculine traits and distance themselves from other women in order to succeed. Interview participants universally acknowledged the existence of a boys' club, but many made the distinction of how prevalent it was in certain industries. For example, women who worked in academia or healthcare were far less likely to report it as an issue, while those in the automotive, energy, or mining sectors reported it as a significant concern. A woman in the energy section described it as a pack mentality that is absolutely painful. In the finance sector, another male-dominated industry, the interview participant noted that while banks work hard at setting female employees up for success, it definitely gets lonelier at the top. And while not all interview participants were immediately familiar with the term queen bee syndrome, hearing its definition triggered strong responses. This quote comes from a woman with more than 3 decades of experience in the education sector. Another woman described her relationship with the only other woman on the executive team at a multinational company. You would think we would be allies and try to make a difference together. She saw me as competition. And an interview subject from the automotive sector suggested that the queen bee effect was often generational, appearing in women who had to navigate a very aggressive and cutthroat path to the executive suite in previous decades. Respondents said public relations organizations offer multiple benefits, with CPRS and IABC being the most popular memberships. As shown in the chart, the most useful aspects of membership were reported to be networking, mentorship, professional development, and examples of other female leaders. While respondents cited several helpful aspects to membership in these organizations, it was not clear that they believed such a membership necessarily helped women to reach positions of leadership in public relations. The value of mentorship was frequently cited in survey results and interviews, but respondents carefully parsed the importance of different kind of membership, with many reporting a preference for informal versus formal mentorship. Women reported that mentorship provided a role model, professional development, networking opportunities, and helped them to build confidence and target work-life balance. But in the in-depth interviews, a very compelling pattern arose. Several subjects cited mentorship from male colleagues as particularly valuable to their career progression. I have never had mentorship from a woman colleague, said a female in the software industry. They have not been as helpful to me as my male colleagues. And a comms executive in the finance industry also stressed the value of male mentors. In her view, she appreciates their candor and the benefits of learning how to be aggressive and a straight shooter. A majority of women confirmed that they had, in turn, provided mentorship to young women in PR. As shown here, 128 women had given advice to younger women in the field. An interview participant who mentors junior women say they often ask for advice about how to be taken seriously at professional tables. Others ask questions about work-life balance and the kinds of compromises that they will be forced to make to succeed. One respondent said, "For me, mentoring is a way of demystifying certain things to show you how the sausage gets made." Conversations with high-performing women in virtually any field often lead to discussions of imposter syndrome, and PR is no different. During the survey and interviews for this research, many respondents raised the topic independently or responded with vigor when it was used as a prompt. It really made me second-guess my seat at the table or lean on the praise of others to validate my success, wrote one respondent. Others described a lack of confidence, hesitancy to speak up, second-guessing their judgment, and a fear of pursuing advancement. This chorus of stories was overwhelming, as you can see here. And for those who have worked in the industry for years, the persistence of imposter syndrome is really discouraging. It breaks my heart a little bit, especially as the mom of a daughter, said one woman. But several women, albeit those in executive positions, see a brighter future. These are some quotes on the topic of imposter syndrome from two high-ranking women in the software industry and the automotive industry. Study participants expressed frustration that solutions were still needed, but also provided extensive suggestions on measures that could potentially address the challenges of gender parity. Their suggestions were grouped into three major themes: more female role models, mentorship programs, and systemic policies that promote equity. According to one survey respondent, we need more women of power and influence in executive roles that are willing to speak to the real experiences, not how they got to the top, but the raw reality of how they must advocate for themselves and not succumb to negative inner voices. In Canadian PR, women are more likely to interact with female colleagues at the junior, middle management, senior levels, and demographics suggest that the next generation graduating from PR schools is also largely female. This continues the trend noted by Toth, Klein, Eldori, and other female luminaries in public relations research. As with previous research, this study found that Canadian public relations is predominantly female, with exceptions in certain industries. Overall, respondents to this study cited education, informal and informal mentorship, and female role models as the most powerful aids in their career progression. At the same time, the option for flexibility and work-life balance are critical to their success. But despite many advances in the workplace, women in Canadian PR still reported facing multiple external barriers to their advancement, most commonly the existence of a pervasive boys' club that prevents women from achieving positions of power. At the same time, women report that they struggle with internal barriers, particularly imposter syndrome. Yet, many women reported that joining PR organizations has helped them, but respondents were split on the value of organizations for advancing their careers, suggesting that they need to further understand what their stakeholders are looking for and how to best market those services to the latest generation of PR professionals. Study respondents leaned towards informal mentorship programs rather than formal structures within the workplace. Respondents repeatedly stressed the value of hearing honest and realistic answers to their questions about career progression and what executive roles would truly demand of them. And a surprising trend emerged amongst the interview respondents, most of whom were at the senior or executive level. They appreciated the mentorship of senior male colleagues, raising the question of whether that advice is valued because they need to understand the rules of how to thrive in a man's world. If women can't advance to the upper echelons of an organization without changing or hiding behaviors that are stereotypically feminine, how far have we really come? For respondents, a major topic of discussion with mentors, colleagues, and personal friends was imposter syndrome. This challenge accompanied them into workplaces and boardrooms, undermining their belief in their intelligence and capability, value, and worthiness to be present. For some, it prevented them from applying to roles that they were well qualified for, or left them awake late at night, replaying conversations through a negative filter of self-doubt and recrimination. It is critical that imposter syndrome remains an open and non-judgmental topic of conversation within the workplace, with the aim of understanding and moving past it. Along with broader systemic changes that proactively target gender equity, survey respondents and interview participants suggested that professional PR organizations should spend more time discussing the issue with their membership. Overall, suggested one female executive in comms, the field is hobbled by the organizational mindset that PR is a simple role that anyone can do, which reduces its value against other portfolios. Sorry, last page. One interview participant who works in policing, quoted here, stated that one of her biggest challenges has been to convince the dominant coalition of the value that her intangible portfolio brings to the force. To counter gender inequity, PR needs more initiatives like the 50-30 challenge. Traditionally male-dominated sectors can apply for additional incentives if they reach their targets. Within public relations, organizations must commit to salary transparency, along with including salary bands on job postings. More companies should voluntarily equalize payment structures. To address these organizations who don't opt in, governments should mandate gender equity in compensation. Further, policies must address the compounding impact of maternity leave on women's careers, ensuring that they are given the option to upskill and develop their competencies upon their return, rather than having their career stall or slide backwards because of a socio-biological sweepstake. To highlight the factors assisting women in their career advancement, the barriers preventing their elevation, the proposed PAD framework suggests that career advancement for Canadian women in public relations can be improved through policy changes, improving access, and the disruption of cultural norms. The top portion of the framework captures the major factors that help women in Canadian PR advance their careers: education, mentorship, role models, and work-life flexibility. On the right, each factor is tagged with relevant examples or elements of the framework. For example, education provides access through existing industry standards, while mentorship provides access through networks and training. Role models provide access through inspiration and career modeling, and work-life flexibility makes it possible through policies and disruption of cultural norms for women to advance without sacrificing personal commitments. The bottom illustrates common barriers and the relevant elements for each. There is no single solution to ensure that Canadian women have equal access to the top of the public relations ladder across multiple industries. It would be naive to suggest that sweeping changes can be made overnight, but women and their male allies must continue to advocate and force the issue of access and equity across the public relations realm. This research builds on previous studies into the factors that advance or prevent progression of women in public relations and communications management. It turns particular attention to the phenomenon of imposter syndrome, how it is discussed amongst women in PR, and what can be done to reach long-term gender equity in Canadian PR. Because women must and will continue their journey to become part of the dominant coalition. The participants in both the survey population and the in-depth interviews included colleagues within the researchers' network, and while attempts were made to eliminate bias in data collection, it is possible that the responses were biased as a result. As the researcher works in the female-dominated higher education sector, it would be possible that this has influenced the results of the survey. Future research should endeavor to recruit more women in traditionally male-dominated industries from across the country to ensure a breadth of lived experience. This study also did not adequately consider the additional challenges faced by racialized or Indigenous women working in Canadian PR, which could be corrected through additional screening questions, targeted survey recruitment, and careful selection of a more diverse cohort of interview subjects. Additionally, future research should also examine the unique experience of 2S LGBTQI+ women and men in Canadian public relations, as evidence suggests that this population faces similar and additional challenges in the fight for equity and representation. Any learnings from past decades should be shared with equity-deserving groups in hopes of shortening their journey to success. Another avenue of future research could explore the impact of menopause and ageism on women in Canadian PR, given that this biological transition occurs in women at a critical stage of their career advancement, when the C-suite might actually be in reach. And finally, delving deeper into the experiences of women in PR at different stages of their life journey could provide insight into the different challenges faced over the course of a woman's career and how to effectively address them. With so many women graduating from public relations programs, there is a tremendous opportunity to establish a baseline in the newest generation of Canadian women to enter the PR workforce. It could provide the foundation for a national or even an international longitudinal study, perhaps in collaboration with an organization like CPRS or IABC, to follow these women over the course of their careers and track their experiences, challenges, and successes. I am profoundly grateful to my thesis advisor, Professor Colleen Killingsworth, for her tremendous patience, encouragement, guidance, and mentorship on this project. Additionally, she and Amy Thurlow generously allowed me to present my early findings alongside them at the Institute for Public Relations Bridge Conference in Washington, a clear example of female mentorship and role modeling. To my professors and fellow members of cohort MCM 15, I truly didn't anticipate meeting such kindred spirits, intelligent colleagues, and wonderful human beings, and I am grateful to have taken this journey with you. Finally, I could not have completed this project without the love and support of my friends and family, especially my parents, my children, Megan and Eric, and my husband, Andrew. Thank you for many pep talks, hugs, and for your unwavering belief in me. It means everything. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for an excellent presentation, Nicolle. And given that we're a little pressed for time, I'm going to immediately go to questions. So Professor Killingsworth, you're up first.
Great. Thanks, Alex, and great work, Nicolle. Absolutely love the social biological sweepstakes term. But your PAD framework, I know you've put a lot of thought into that framework. How do you see rolling that out? How could organizations begin to adopt that framework?
I think it would be very essential for organizations that have an existing DEI structure or those who are hoping to create it to take something like the PAD framework and use it to audit and then match the problems that they're experiencing within their structure. So for example, if women are experiencing barriers related to pay inequity, to discount, those types of issues, what are the different elements that can be used to affect that? Are there policy changes? Are there processes? Is there salary transparency that needs to be incorporated into HR practices? Are there mentorship programs that need to be put in place to help women rise through the ranks? And frankly, do they need to take a look at something like the 50-30 challenge to really make sure that they're meeting the needs of representing communities within their organization? So going back to the framework, I think that essentially taking the individual problems that we can identify, because there are commonalities, and then using these different elements within the framework to target and approach them using the types of things that we know do work: mentorship, female role models, opportunities for professional development.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Professor Killingsworth?
Oh,
before we move to
I do. Yeah, sorry, I thought we were doing 1-1. My only other question is, what next? What are you going to do with this research?
So ideally, I would love to publish it. I think there might be some things that need to be done to it before it reaches that stage of polish to get it there. I'm very interested in something that just came up, whether or not this actually turns into any further research, and I'm sure my husband is hoping that it won't. But one of my interview subjects mentioned the impact of menopause on women as they reach this stage in their career, because it's this overwhelming biological experience that strikes women right at this key point in their career development. I think it's such an interesting interconnection that needs to be explored. Compared to men at the same age. Imagine a woman who is in an organizational meeting and is suddenly experiencing brain fog or an overwhelming hot flush and is sweating profusely. That has a reflection within the professional community, and that is an additional barrier that women have to face. She might be experiencing, crashing fatigue due to a drop in hormones. This is something, again, that male counterparts do not experience. So I think it would be very interesting to explore how that biological transition affects women during this key point in their career.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Flynn.
That's a global study of women in leadership, not just narrowly confined to public relations. So good
But
luck
don't
with
boil
that.
the ocean.
Maybe
Right,
there's
Dr.
a
Flynn?
PhD in that. That's right. So congratulations on this. This is something that has this whole study has piqued my interest since for 20 years. And probably because I was a student of Elizabeth Toth and her perspective and the research that she had done with Klein and Elduri and others, Lori Grunick as well. David Dozier at a conference about 5 years ago suggested that the pay gap of $10,000, which they did a global study and they were able to isolate the difference between what general average men make and women make is to be $10,000. He believes, and they looked at every other factor and could rule out everything but discrimination. And Dozier's view was women should, in public relations, should launch a class action lawsuit against agencies and businesses because it is a defined gender pay equity gap. What do you think about that?
I think greatly respect David Dozier. He's done some phenomenal work that I had the opportunity to read during this research. If that can be confirmed by other research studies, that presents a tremendous opportunity. But again, as you were just saying, this becomes more than just a PR issue, because of course there's the issue of compounding equity loss over the years, how that impacts how that impacts overall income, how that impacts pension. And I think it would be quite challenging even to go back and ask for backdated income loss over the years. But you know what? It should happen. It has happened in other industries for other factors. Because if the only reason that you are being paid less than your male colleagues is because of one chromosome, that's not okay. We all bring our best, and some of these women are coming to the PR industry with more education than their male colleagues, and they're still earning less. Amy Thurlow's research pointed that out within the Canadian context. So it absolutely should go ahead. We certainly need more research in that field to back up Dozier's findings, but I would be very interested in following that.
So I'm going to take another, and I don't know if Colleen remembers this, but in 2006, Lori Grunick spoke to the Canadian CPRS conference in Niagara Falls, and there was a man that asked her a simple question. With this gender difference, with the growing number of women in the profession, how do you incentivize men to come back into the profession? And Lori said she has no interest in incentivizing those that have already been incentivized for most of their lives. But there is a truism that happens in this kind of when you have an industry that has this kind of strong gender difference as well. It's called the escalator effect, right? So that when a man does come into this position, they escalate higher and more immediate because of this. So how does your research address both these kinds of issues, right? Well, there's a sense by some that you just got to have more men in. That'll solve the problem, right? If you have just more men in. And, when the men get there, and we've seen this in case where very inexperienced men come in and escalate above. How do you deal with, these are significant issues. How do you deal with these kind of issues? How does your research deal with this?
It did come up several times, including the escalator phenomenon that you described. Several of my interview subjects talked about how many men just seem to leapfrog through the organization to the highest levels, even though they weren't necessarily more qualified than women, simply because they were now in the minority overall. But they ended up with the dominant coalition, while women who may have worked for a tremendous period of time and had phenomenal both industry knowledge and organizational knowledge were still left at the senior level or below. So it definitely did come up in the course of my research. But in terms of incentivizing men, this project is definitely not, or the findings of this project, I really hope that they don't suggest that I just want men to get out of PR. I think that would be a horrible result of this kind of research. What we need is balance. We need 50%, not 30%. We need 50%. That's where we should be aiming, and not just of gender, but we need more people in equity deserving groups. We need more diversity. We need more variety of opinions. So, I mean, if that involves, including more men in the upcoming classes in PR, that's fantastic because we need their voices too. I don't want to exclude them, but I want to make sure that people are being advanced because they are the right folks, not just because they have a certain chromosome. And I want to make sure that that we are aiming for 50%. Again, feminism is not about taking over; it's about finding a balance.
Good, thanks.
Excellent questions. Thank you so much, folks. I have a question myself. It might come from a left field, but it's something that's been on my mind quite a bit. And as the profession becomes more data-driven, you took the data science class with me, and as we kind of move towards a heavier role of machines, artificial intelligence and bots and whatnot. And this is a speculative question. I'm not looking for a right answer. What do you think that will have as an impact on women's participation in PR? Yeah.
You know what? This is so interesting. This came up. I stumbled across this this one paper, and that led to another. And it talked about how because of things like social media, which is a very communications rich media, it's very much about emotional connection. It's very much about reaching out and forming communities. The paper suggested that women were actually slightly, they had the upper hand in that particular type of communications, and that they may actually be able to leverage that type of strength for future communications. And so that could potentially help them as a strength in the industry. But when you compare that to issues like bots, it really comes down to how smart the algorithm can become. Can an algorithm learn how to communicate in the same way as a man, in the same way as a woman? Can they pivot quickly enough to recognize who are they talking to and what kind of communication will they perhaps need? If I'm speaking to a young male, a bot is going to have to adapt in a specific way to communicate in a way that really speaks to that person and engages them, whereas a 49-year-old woman probably wants to be spoken to in a different way. So I think that comes down to the strength of the algorithm, but it is quite possible that the strength and the communicative abilities and the emotional intelligence of women could potentially sort of be leveraged to give us the upper hand in things like digital communications, social media, and other forms of communications in the future.
Yeah, I think so too. I also think that the fact that more women are formally educated in PR than men gives them an upper hand in this sort of data-driven future. But yeah, thank you for that answer. That was a great answer. I appreciate it. Any further questions from our supervisory panel, Professor Farnsworth and Dr. Flynn?
No, just because of time, I think we
Okay.
get one round.
Any I'll just make a call out to the audience. Any questions from the gallery or comments? Hearing none, I guess now, Terry, you own this meeting, I believe. So you'll put everybody except the three of us on the committee in a room, and we will be back very shortly.